Greetings, one and all. My name is JD from Studio 2105. Welcome back to MixStream Online and another episode of Weekly Update Wednesdays. As usual, a warm welcome to all the new viewers to the channel, and a big shout out and a thank you to all the patrons who help to support the channel financially. If you are new to this channel and you are not yet a subscriber, please do click on the subscribe button, which is down there, and don't forget to click on the bell as well so that you'll be notified every time I put out a brand new video. Do sign up for the email list for a bunch of free stuff, and if you want to become a patron, right, and to support the creation of content on this channel, head on down to the website www.patreon.com/studio2105. Lots of special perks and benefits for patron subscribers, right? Head on down to the link to find out more. If you're thinking about building a studio or are already in the process of designing and building one, this week's video is for you. Which is better for a recording studio? A window between the recording booth and the control room, or using cameras? This is an interesting question, and being a studio owner myself, I've also asked this question during the design phase of my own studio build right here at 2105. The reason recording studios have windows is to enable visual communication between the artists and the musicians in the live room or the vocal booth, and the producer or the engineer here in the control room. Now this becomes especially important when you are dealing with a band or a bunch of musicians, right? As sightlines allows everyone involved, to obtain visual cues from one another, and generally this enhances the whole feeling and the vibe, right, of playing in a band and playing in an ensemble. Now, traditionally, these designs, came about obviously before the availability of monitor screens and cameras that are affordable. So if you couple a couple of TV screens and cameras with a simple talkback system, this electronic option is quite a viable option for studio communications nowadays. Now, obviously, if you are a one-room studio, or if you only focus on production, mixing, or mastering, right, you won't be concerned, right, about the issue of windows. You can tailor the room for the best acoustics possible. I personally come from an older school, a more old school era of working in studios, and I vastly prefer having an isolation window built in. And although arguably having a camera and a monitor setup, it accomplishes the same goal, but in my opinion, there's a sense of disconnect when you're watching each other on a screen, instead of looking directly into each other's eyes while you're talking to a person, right? But maybe that's just me. I'm a little bit more old-fashioned that way. So having a window or having a screen and a camera setup, which is better, right? Here are several considerations before deciding which one works for you. Number one, what type of property are you in? Do you own the property, or are you renting the space? Now, some owners, some landlords do not allow any major renovation work. Or even if they do, they will insist that you return the structure to its original condition once your lease expires and when you leave the place. Now this means having to remove the glass panes, the insulation, the window frame assembly, etc., and having to patch up that hole in the wall. Fortunately, this is not as difficult a task as you may think, right? With the right workers and the right manpower, it's fairly easily done. And you can still reuse, the window frame and the window assembly, and all the materials in a future studio build elsewhere. Now, if you are going to be in the space for a short term, obviously it doesn't really make sense to do any sort of major, structural work or construction work. So perhaps the other option, right, going with a screen and cameras would probably be the wiser choice. And once again, right, even the equipment and the wiring can be repurposed when you move to another place. Number two, cost. Now, surprisingly, right, the cost of installing, an isolation window, right, the entire window assembly, isn't really that much compared to, buying computer screens and cameras. Take into account, let's say two flat screen TVs, right? Two decent cameras. You have your cable, you have your wiring that's going between the two different rooms, the wall mounts and all that equipment, that can easily run up to a fair amount as well. Now, coupled to that, there is also the added electricity consumption, although I would say, it is fairly minimal, and also the presence of more electronic equipment in the room, right? To think about, okay? So if you don't like, the look of having more stuff inside, the room, maybe your room is small, maybe the vocal booth is a little bit tight, putting in a large TV screen can, take up a little bit of space and a little bit of real estate. These are things that you want to think about as well. Number three, acoustic reflections. Now, both a glass window and monitor screens will cause reflections, okay? Some people argue that, if you put in screens, then you won't have the issue of the windows. Don't forget, okay? A flat screen TV or flat screen monitor is also going to reflect the sound as well, okay? Now, fortunately, this issue is fairly easy to deal with. Windows, usually when they are installed, they usually split. Okay, this means they have a little bit of angle built into them, either upwards or downwards, right? And screens as well can also be positioned and angled so that ensure that the sound, right, isn't being reflected back towards where the microphone is. Number four, artist privacy versus communication sidelines. Some artists prefer to have a little bit of privacy, and they feel less self-conscious and thus perform better when they don't have like eyes staring at them from the control room. Now, in situations like these, being in a separate room and perhaps even being able to turn off the camera might be a good thing. Sometimes also there is a benefit to this, right? It helps the engineer and people who are in the control room, right, the producer perhaps, to really just focus on listening to the performance, listening to the delivery as well. So there are some pros to this also. Now, on the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, right, there are just some things that just work better, right, when you have direct line of sight. For me as an engineer, right, I sometimes would want to look and to make sure, be able to look at the mic placement, to watch and look at the proximity of the singer, right, in relation to the mic, and a lot of things, right, such as non-verbal cues, such as the facial expressions, body language, hand signals. Sometimes these kind of things, right, can give a bit of encouragement, a little bit of positive reinforcement as well, just by having some of the body language. And arguably, again, you can see and communicate that way through a screen, but I personally feel there's a disconnect, right, when you are again staring at the screen compared to actually looking at the real person through the window. Number five, wired versus IP cameras. So if you are going with the monitor screen and the camera option, these are things you need to consider, okay? Now, IP cameras are going to be cheaper. They're going to be much more convenient to install, right? But usually because they meant for security purposes, they function as CCTVs essentially. They're going to have poor image quality, and there's going to be a slight latency, right, to the image. If that doesn't bother you, then that's okay, right? That's perfectly all right. Now, wired cameras, on the other hand, right, will have none of the latency and generally is going to have better image quality, but you are also going to need, right, all the wiring and that's associated to go along with it. So from this video, it very much comes across that I'm actually a person who prefers having a window compared to a monitor screen, okay? But again, maybe that's because I'm so used to working in a studio, right, with a window in between the control room and the live room. I'm just so used to working that way. See, perhaps if you're the setup that you work with and you're already used to it, and the artists that you work with, right, are comfortable with that, that's also a perfectly viable option as well, right? Whatever floats your boat, man. Whichever works for you, and works for the artist that you work with, just go along with it. So which do you prefer? What do you use in your studio? I would love to hear your opinions and your thoughts on this. Let me know, what kind of setup do you have in your studio? Do you have a control room window? Do you have a window, right? Or do you use a monitor screen and a camera setup? Let me know, which one do you like, which one do you prefer, and what your thoughts on about it. I'd love to hear from you. Hopefully you found this video useful and informative. Thank you so much for watching once again. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like, do share this as well with your friends. And if you haven't done so, remember to click on the subscribe button and also on the notification bell. Once again, do consider signing up to become a patron. Head on down to www.patreon.com/studio2105 if you want to help to support the channel financially. I'll really appreciate the support. And see you again in another video real soon. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy. Happy recording and mixing. Peace, love, and music.